man who needs no introduction.
The Black Information Network is committed to bringing you up-to-the-date news stories that are relevant, informative, and inspiring. And while news stories are always being updated and others are breaking, we understand that you need to be in the know all week long. Welcome to your midweek memo on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast with me, your host, Ramses Ja. All right, first up from TMZ, President Biden is offering up an explanation for his lackluster performance debating Donald Trump. He says his travel schedule had him running on fumes and feeling sleepy. Biden made the excuse Tuesday at a campaign fundraiser in McLean, Virginia, and said that he almost fell asleep on the debate stage. The president blamed his lack of energy on being sapped from long trips in the weeks before Thursday's first presidential debate, including a trip to France in early June for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. All right, so we're still here, still talking about the debate, and I think that we're going to continue to have conversations about Joe Biden's continued viability as president and commander-in-chief of these United States. I remember the night of the debate hearing that he had a cold as well. I want to be very clear and very fair here. He didn't offer this up as an excuse. He merely offered it as an explanation. He acknowledged that he wasn't all the way together on the debate stage, and that, you know, the American people deserve better than that. This is effectually what he communicated. But he and all of us recognize that it really shook a lot of us, because that was not the time nor the place to have any slip-ups, to be tired, or to, you know, not be on your A game. And we recognize that people, humans, can be off their game. I remember watching a presidential debate with Barack Obama where he didn't have it that night. He came back and won the war, but he lost that battle. We saw it. And the same is true with Joe Biden here. But unfortunately, the optics surrounding Joe Biden caused his performance at that debate to be very concerning. One of the things that I've discussed on this program, and that, you know, I've seen other people discussing, and I think it's important to bear in mind, is that, again, we have two people running for president. One of them will be the president. That is the position that we are in as of today. There is no way that we get around that outcome. And rather than hyper-focusing on who will be president, it might be a better long-term strategy for us to consider the administration. Granted, the name on the administration is very important. The Trump administration, the Biden administration, exceptionally important. But it indeed is the administration that carries out the functions of government. And as we've mentioned before, the Trump administration is chock full of people who espouse the ideas of Project 2025, which fundamentally changes and reshapes this country into a more Eurocentric, white supremacist, anti-black environment than it already is. And of course, the Biden administration in its entirety, not just Biden, is not that. Regardless of how critical you may be of Joe Biden himself, the Biden administration is not that. And that's something that, of course, is even more important to keep in mind, given the recent Supreme Court decisions on presidential immunity. Because now the worry is that if Donald Trump gets back in office, he will be unhinged. And, you know, Project 2025 is a go. They will change the way power flows permanently, and then keep that power concentrated into a smaller group of individuals' hands who are very loyal to a deeply conservative state agenda. And there is no place for us as a people, maybe individuals, but no place for us as a people in that country. It's certainly not a comfortable place. We will be a a class of servants, a second-class citizenry, easily identifiable by our black skin. And, you know, maybe there are people who like the fact that Donald Trump will be able to be in the office unhinged. I certainly wish Joe Biden would take advantage of this Supreme Court decision, because if you can just assassinate anyone and get off scot-free now since you're the president, I mean, the idea is right there. If you can just detain your political rivals or compromise them in some meaningful way, the Supreme Court already gave you the green light, bro. Take one for the team. Do us all a favor. So, you know, I certainly do wish that there was the candidate with who could play in the gray, who could take advantage of the framework that we're working with. But again, here's where we are. And while we're on the topic, that Supreme Court decision has affected some of Trump's other cases, including his hush money sentencing, which will be postponed until September. And that also throws a wrench into the election interference case in Georgia with Fani Willis. So, of course, we'll continue to watch those, but that Supreme Court decision has had a tremendous ripple effect throughout politics in the United States. Moving on, next up from the Griot, out of Richmond, Virginia. 4 years after violence erupted during the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, a jury ordered white nationalist leaders and organizations to pay a total of more than $26 million in damages to people with physical or emotional injuries from the event. Most of that money, $24 million, was for punitive damages, but a judge later slashed that amount to $350,000 to be shared by 8 plaintiffs. Well, on Monday, a federal appeals court restored more than $2 million in punitive damages, finding that each of the plaintiffs should receive $350,000 instead of the $43,750 each would have received under the lower court's ruling. So that one's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, it's really important because anytime white supremacists are punished for their white supremacy and their racism and their physical and emotional harm that they've inflicted on a population. Indeed, I remember that Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. I went to Charlottesville after that. And I remember there was a white ally, a young woman who actually died there. And anytime I see justice being served where it seldom is, and people being held accountable where that is seldom the case, I applaud that. And my hope, of course, is that the people who were harmed emotionally or physically get every dollar and then some that is owed to them. All right, next up from the Black Information Network, former President Donald Trump's campaign team, has responded after an Atlanta man claimed he was misled into hosting one of their events at his barbershop. The barbershop owner, Rocky Jones, told local outlets that a friend initially approached him about hosting a roundtable for small black businesses in the area. Jones said he was shocked when he later learned that the roundtable was a pro-Trump event featuring appearances from the former president's black allies, Dr. Ben Carson and Representative Byron Donalds. Well, on Saturday, Trump's campaign slammed claims suggesting the barbershop owner was blindsided by the event. Trump's team shared an agreement signed by Jones to host a, quote, political event for Donald Trump for President Incorporated from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. for $4,800. Quote, the business owner signed an agreement with the Trump campaign and received payment for the time spent in his location for this event, end quote. Trump's campaign wrote on X alongside a photocopy of the agreement. So I know that I originally had reserved judgment. I'll be kind to myself. I had reserved judgment because I know that the Trump folks are prone to using smoke and mirrors and slippery tactics to, coax the optics in a certain direction. But I took a look at this document that was signed, and it does indeed say Donald Trump for President Incorporated, and it has the financial consideration. And so that means one of two things. One, either this barbershop owner didn't read the agreement, or two, the barbershop owner was interested in having the $4,800 and was not happy about the backlash that came from hosting a Donald Trump event at his barbershop. And my suspicions are leading me in the direction of the latter. So every so often you got to eat crow. Today's that day for me. Looks like this guy went into it eyes wide open, but you know, if more evidence comes out suggesting that he was indeed blindsided by this event, you know, I'll take another look at it. But for now, that's the story. Finally, today from The Guardian, a U.S. federal judge has refused prosecutors' request to prohibit the maker of the 1990s rap classic Bling Bling, quote, from promoting and glorifying future gun violence / murder, end quote, in songs at concerts while on supervised release from prison, saying such a restriction could violate his constitutional rights to free speech. But the artist, known as BG, must provide the government with copies of any song, he writes moving forward, ahead of their production or promotion. And if they are deemed to be inconsistent with his goals of rehabilitation, prosecutors could move to toughen the terms governing his supervised release. That mixed ruling came Friday from U.S. District Court Judge Susie Morgan in the latest development to a case that prompted discussions in some circles about an American musician's rights to free expression under his country's constitution, as well as his need to financially support himself with federal authorities' obligations to enforce the supervised prison release plan, which he accepted. All right, so in short, BG, for those of us who were around in the late 90s, the person who made the term bling bling popular, and a whole bunch of other Cash Money record songs. I was a big Cash Money fan in the late 90s and early 2000s. Shoot, I'm still a Cash Money fan when they get it right. You know, we all know who BG is. You know, again, those of us from that time that, you know, grew up with that music, that was it. It was hitting. They didn't miss. And I want to be very clear. Lil Wayne says that he's the inventor of the term bling bling. But it was BG's song called Bling Bling that featured Lil Wayne that popularized the term. I just want to be clear about that. But yeah, turns out that BG has to submit his art, his lyrics, to the courts to be able to determine whether or not what he is saying and glorifying on stage and in the studio is consistent with the terms of his release. And it's funny, I had a conversation with a friend of mine from the British Broadcasting Company, on air, by the way. I was interviewed for the program. And we were discussing this very thing because globally, America is known for free speech and, you know, the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms. So whenever free speech is restricted, especially by someone black, you know, it causes people to scratch their heads in the same way that when the Second Amendment is available to every citizen of the United States until that citizen is black, it causes people internationally to scratch their heads. Because, you know, in China, Q says this all the time, in China, everybody is Chinese, right? And in Thailand, everybody is Thai. And in Saudi Arabia, everybody is Saudi. But in America, not everybody is American. Somehow that is the case here. You know, you got the folks that are, this is America. And then they wave the flag trying to somehow proclaim that this country belongs to them and that everyone else is somehow encroaching on their freedoms or their access to the American dream. Black people have historically been at the top of that list of people that, you know, the quote unquote real Americans complain about. Now, I want to be very clear. The real Americans are Native Americans, and they still exist. Indeed, this very episode is being recorded on unceded ancestral lands of the Akima and O'odham peoples, who are still here. But yeah, back to this case. It's interesting how there have been over 500 cases across the United States where lyrics have been used against rappers, black rappers, in court cases. And BG made a point in commenting on his ruling. Obviously, he was very grateful that he didn't have to return to prison because of a parole violation. Indeed, he was in the studio with Gucci Mane, who is a convicted felon, and part of the terms of his release is that he cannot associate with other felons. And he was also with Boosie as well, making music. And this is his work. And so technically that could be a violation of his parole. So he was grateful that he didn't have to go back. But again, it was a mixed bag because now he has to monitor what he discusses. And he said it best. He says, you know, it's like asking Robert De Niro not to play a mobster. And I just kind of appreciated that. You know, people think that everybody who raps about rap stuff, that's their life 24/7. And for some people that might be true, but for most people, you know, they laugh, they spend time with their families, they go on vacations with their loved ones, they play, they enjoy their time on this planet. It's not 24/7 guns and drugs and whatever else immoral that is assigned to quote unquote rappers. You know, it's like that's the job that they do, and they play it up because that usually leads to more success. A great parallel is that I am a broadcaster and a podcaster. That is not the only thing that I do by far. I live a very full life. You know, I record these episodes, I submit them, and then I go back and live my life. And I ride bikes with my son, and I spend time with my family, and I make art, and I hang out with my friends, and I have other businesses that I own. So again, having this very one-dimensional view of rappers, and then compromising them based on their art feels a little unfair, but indeed it is a mixed bag. I do respect the fact that there is a lot of violence in black and brown communities, so a lot of the stories reflect that. But I say to the powers that be, if you don't want this reflected in the music, then change the socioeconomic conditions that lead to the environments that these people grow up in. Don't point at the art that comes from it. That is unfair and indeed a false equivalency. So we will leave that one right there. And of course, if you have anything else, please reach out to me on all social media at RamsesJah. I'd love to keep any of these conversations going. This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show was produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, RamsesJah, on all social media. And join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.